Ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, animals, spirits, welcome to an episode of something I'm going to call a news drop because that's what I think it more suited towards, and it's a drop of news to you. And since I'm dropping news directly to you and not anybody in the other studio or anybody over the phone, I need your opinions, and I need your comments, and I need everything that you think about this in the comment section down below. So, today, NHL news. We're going to talk about it in a second, but let me just say RIP to Tyler Skaggs. I apologize for the shout-out moment of silence for him, but it's horrible seeing an athlete, a person, a human die well before their time, and a moment of silence for Tyler Skaggs. Today, we have NHL news, and not necessarily NHL news, but an NHL update. And as you know, very similar time frame to the NBA, NHL and NBA free agency kind of occur at the same time. Well, they occur exactly the same time. But regardless, we're going to talk about NHL free agents that have signed a few different trades. I'm not going to go through all the trades because some of them are not very important. Some are just salary dumps and whatevers. But we'll go over a couple of trades and all the free agents signing to every single team, and we'll talk about the impact that a few of them make. First, and this is, you can check it out, I'll link it down in the description below, where I'm getting this information from. It's just the NHL tracker on NHL.com, but we'll talk about the deals and the things that are signed otherwise. The Anaheim Ducks, they end up signing and re-signing nobody. The Ducks didn't really do too much. They don't really have all too many free agents going into this part of the year. Group 2 free agents, Chase DeLeo, Justin Close, Chad Johnson, Chad Ochocinco. Just kidding. They don't really have all too many people to re-sign. They're kind of in this really odd spot where they're not competing for anything right now. They're not really hopefuls for a big playoff push. So they're kind of in this weird rebuilding phase. Let's develop some players. Let's sign some veterans, and let's waste another year, in lack of a better term. Team number 2, Arizona Coyotes. They've signed a few different things here. They signed forward Mile, defenseman Ness to 2-year contracts, and forward Bennett signs a 1-year deal. Forward Krause signs a 3-year deal. Now, I'll talk about Krause for them because Krause was a restricted free agent. He's very, very young, 22 years old. He ended up scoring 25 points in 81 games. Not all too much, especially with the restricted free agents we have now in the NHL and in the past couple of years. But, Krause kind of fits this role player, bottom 6 role right now. He's still young. He's still developing, so you could still see him make a jump to somewhere in the realm of 30 points this year, 35 points. But good trade or good signing for the Arizona Coyotes. Team number 3, we're going to talk about the Boston Bruins. They signed Andre Lindholm. They signed a few guys, few depth guys, AHLers, and they signed Clifton to a 3-year contract. Now, they signed Connor Clifton to a 3-year extension, and, he's a good defenseman. He's going to fit into their, obviously starting pairing, not their top pairing, but, could kind of fit anywhere in that role. Boston needs defensemen, especially with the aging Chara out there. They kind of need that youth on there, and I think, Connor Clifton fits that role very well for them. The Buffalo Sabres, and they were a little bit busy in this. They signed goalie Hammond to a 1-year contract, and they signed essentially a bunch of role players. Lazar, Gilmore, another 2 guys that got 1-year contracts, and then 2-year contracts to Adea and Smith. Now, none of these guys are going to be the biggest role players. I mean, obviously there's a lot of big players out there like Panarin and Duchesne, but these guys are going to fit roles on the team. They're most likely going to be training camp bodies and potentially could crack a starting lineup. The 2-year guys most likely will crack the starting lineup. The Calgary Flames, they signed Cam Talbot, and I'm really, really high on Cam Talbot. I think he has a lot of potential, and he really, really could become a starting goaltender, not an elite or a franchise goaltender, but a guy that can really, fit into roles when he needs to. And Cam Talbot's a good signing. They signed a few other guys on here, defenseman Davidson, forward Froze, and Kirkland. Those guys kind of, if they fit, they fit. Don't think all too much about it. They have a lot of free agents that I'm assuming they're trying to re-sign. Matthew Tkachuk, obviously the biggest one out there because he is a restricted free agent. He had an outstanding year last year, and he had a really good playoffs. So Matthew Tkachuk is one of the guys that you have to pay pretty hefty here. So be wary for that pretty soon here. The Carolina Hurricanes, they signed goalie Mrazek 2-year contract. Good for them. They need a backup goaltender. They need that pairing, I guess. But the really big news is forward Sebastian Aho got offered got an offer sheet from the Montreal Canadiens, and he ended up signing that deal. And the Hurricanes had the opportunity to match, and they obviously did. Sebastian Aho had an outstanding season last year, restricted free agent going into this offseason, and he ended up he's getting re-signed to a 5-year, $43 million contract, which is pretty good. He kind of sets the market, I would say, for these restricted free agents because he's sitting at around that $8 million mark, a little bit above $8 million, $8.23 million contract each year. And he sets this really interesting dynamic for these restricted free agents that are going through the league right now. So you look at teams like Mikko Rantanen, the Avalanche with Mikko Rantanen. You look at Patrick Laine, you look at Tkachuk, and that's kind of the baseline. Aho is kind of that baseline of where you want to sign guys financially in that range of $8 million to $9 million a year. The Chicago Blackhawks, they end up signing Carpenter, a forward Carpenter, a 3-year deal, comp to a 2-year deal, 2 forwards. They'll slot right into those bottom 6 roles. And they end up signing a goalie, Robert Lehner. He agrees to a 1-year deal. Now, Robin, he agreed to a 1-year, $5 million deal, which is really, really good, all considering Corey Crawford is still there. He kind of got shafted by his previous team, New York, and he really, really did get shafted because they ended up going and signing Semyon Varlamov, which we'll talk about later. But there was a big, big deal with how that kind of panned out because he's like, of course I wanted to return, but they ended up signing another goalie before I was even getting back. So it's kind of a sore topic for him, but he ends up signing with Chicago, so it should be a good team for him to get his revenge on, let's say. We'll talk about the Colorado Avalanche very briefly. They signed Colin Wilson back to a year. They signed Jonas Donskoy, who actually scored the goal on them to knock them out of the playoffs last year, so it's going to be a little bit of that tough little dynamic going on in the locker room. They also signed forward Bellemare from the Golden Knights. Now, Bellemare, he's going to be bottom 6 guy for them, and then they also signed a few different guys on here. There's a big trade that occurred a few days back with Tyson Barrie and Nazem Kadri, and it was essentially, we'll call it a 1-for-1 deal with a flip of a 6th and a 3rd-round pick. So the Avs get a 3rd-round pick and Toronto gets a 6th-round pick. Interesting deal. Barrie was worth more, but he's 1-year rental. Kadri is 3 years left on his deal. So it depends on how you look at it. I don't think the Avs got all they should have for Barrie, but I feel like they got something for him. So I don't want to call it a complete loss for them, but it's whatever. Columbus Blue Jackets, they had a lot of free agents about to leave. They had Matt Duchene, Panarin, they had Sergei Bobrovsky, they had a few guys that were crucial and key pieces to their future that ended up leaving in free agency. So they had to go and make some interesting deals. They signed Nyquist to a 4-year deal, who's going to slot in their top pairing or in their top 6 guys. Signed defenseman Murray to a 2-year contract and a goalie Korpisalo to a 1-year deal. Korpisalo is a little bit older, but a solid signing nonetheless. Nyquist is aging, but he will do very, very well for them. They didn't really replace all the things that they could have or they should have, and it's tough for them. But regardless, Dallas Stars make a lot of signings. Joe Pavelski being the big one for me because Joe Pavelski, he is a captain. He was a captain. He signs a 3-year deal with the Stars, and he's, it's a huge, huge, huge guy for them, especially because they lost Jordan Spezza, and Pavelski's obviously a big, big increase to their talent level, and that makes this team very, very dangerous going into next year. They signed a few more guys, but just role players. Detroit, they end up signing Patrick Nemeth and Calvin Pickard. They also sign Falupa to a 2-year deal. He's also another forward. Patrick Nemeth, he's gonna be on your team, but he's gonna be that kind of bottom pairing. He's going to be like 5th, 6th defenseman on the team, but he can be a solid guy. He's played in the league for a little bit, and he's a leader. So good signing for them. Calvin Pickard, 2-year deal. He's not gonna. I doubt he'd be your starter, or if you don't really have anybody else or injuries, rake. He can slot in. He's not going to be the greatest, goalie out there. Now, Edmonton signs a few different people. Granlund to a 1-year deal. Chiasson, who's a good forward, decent forward, to a 2-year deal. And, they sign a bunch of role players. They haven't signed anybody great for them out there. So it was an interesting little day for the Edmonton Oilers. Florida Panthers. Now, they went out and they signed people. They went out and signed Sergei Bobrovsky, who I kind of predicted in my last video that they'd sign him, but I didn't predict they'd sign him for this long. They ended up signing him to a 7-year, $70 million contract. I was predicting somewhere in the realm of 5 years, $40 million. But people pay for goalies, and Florida has money. So it's interesting. They drafted Spencer Knight in the first round, and Spencer Knight, decent guy, he's the best goaltender since, let's say, Carey Price, because he's gotten a few comparisons to Carey Price, but he needs a bridge couple of years before he develops into the goaltender that he should be. Bobrovsky fits that role, but he's also signed for 7 years, so we'll see about that. Bobrovsky's signed until he's like 37, 38 now, so we'll see. We'll see about the future of Bobrovsky, but it's a good deal for him. He secured the bag. The Kings, they signed really nobody. You don't really need to know about it. They signed a guy named Ryan and a guy named Ferk. That's about it with the Kings. They're kind of in no man's land right now. The Minnesota Wild, they're aging. Everybody knows that. They're aging. They still have the big contracts on their team, 2 big contracts they signed at the same time. But they did end up signing Zuccarello, 5-year deal, and I think Zuccarello fits very, very well on this team. Now, Matt Zuccarello, 5 years, $30 million, which is about averaging $6 million a year. It fits well. It looks good. And he's 31 years old. He was hurt a little bit last season, but, this kind of contract shows how much they really believe in this guy. And I think he'll slot very well into this team and could very easily be a 60-point scorer every single year. The Montreal Canadiens signed goalie Kincaid to a 1-year deal, and they signed forward Barber to a 1-year deal, 2-way contract. Kincaid, he's going to be your backup goalie behind Carey Price. He's there. Don't think all too much about it, but it's a thing. Now, Nashville made a really, really big impact signing in Matt Duchene. So they traded away PK Subban, his big deal with PK Subban, to the New Jersey Devils. So Matt Duchene comes in and he provides a huge scoring presence, and he signs a team-ish friendly deal. It's 7 years, which is good, but he gets about $8 million annually. New Jersey Devils, they draft Jack Hughes, they get PK Subban, and they're really set for a interesting next year. Next season could be very, very good for the Devils. They signed a few different role players. Their longest term contract they signed was a 2-year deal. Tennyson, a defenseman, that's bottom pairing. New York Islanders, they end up re-signing Anders Lee, which is huge for them because Anders Lee is arguably one of their best players, and he signed a 7-year deal. They also, in the kind of betrayal signing, they signed Semyon Varlamov as opposed to Robin Lehner. And now my one issue with Varlamov, because I am an avid Avs watcher, Varlamov, he gets injured. He's very, very good, and he's a very, very fan favorite type player. He'll be like, wow, we love this guy, but it comes down to if he's on the ice and he's actually out there playing consistently without getting injured. He's had some groin issues in the past, so be careful of Semyon Varlamov. Next, we have the New York Rangers. Now, they end up landing Panarin. Now, Panarin, this was a huge deal. Massive deal. 7 years, $81.5 million. We'll see, but Panarin secures the bag for sure, and it's interesting to see. Ottawa Senators, we have a few more teams left. They don't really sign many big-time contracts, few 1-year contracts. Ainsley, Suarez, Enos, and Paul. It was just kind of a off year for them. They didn't have their first-round pick because it was sent to the Avalanche and a part of the Matt Duchene trade. So the Ottawa Senators are kind of in this weird role. Philadelphia Flyers, they sign deals to a few different people, but they don't sign any big names. Look for some re-signings and some other stuff they have, because they have quite a few unrestricted and restricted free agents. Pittsburgh, they end up signing Tanev and Warsofsky. Warsofsky and Agazino from the Avalanche. They're AHLers, so it's intriguing to see that they gave him 2-year deals. They signed Brandon Tanev to a 6-year, $21 million contract. Average value of $3.5 million, which isn't all too much, but he's 27 years old. He scored 29 points in 80 games. Now, this is kind of that weird contract. It can either look really, really good or it can look really, really bad. And it all depends on the development of a 27-year-old. He can decline from here or he can get better from here. Interesting deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but I like it. They secured a guy for a long time, which is not that bad. San Jose, they end up losing out on a few different guys. They lose out on their captain. It's hard to see the Sharks be better than they were last year. But if they do fit something well, they signed a 4-year deal to a forward, Timo Meier. Now, this is, he was already on their team. It's a re-signing. He had 66 points, 78 regular season games, and then 15 points in 20 Stanley Cup playoff games. He was instrumental in their run through the playoffs. Hopefully, he can stay on the ice and stay completely healthy, which he has kind of shown in his career. But after losing Pavelski, after losing a few other role players, hopefully Timo Meier can come to the occasion as a 22-year-old being so young. The St. Louis Blues, the Stanley Cup champions, they don't really sign many things. They kind of sit where they're at. They have all their guys signed, all their really big guys signed for a while. Jordan Binnington would be their biggest guy that they have to look towards re-signing. He's a restricted free agent. He's young. Look for a big time extension happening because he had a rookie record in amount of wins in the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning kind of up against the cap as well. They don't sign many big deals, but they sign a bunch of people. McKinney, Shen, Witkowski, Wedgwood, Martin, Mueller, Foucault, AHL contract. So they're really looking to maintain. They're really looking, they won the President's Trophy last year. They got disappointed in the first round of the playoffs. They hope to just kind of maintain what they had and then expand upon it and hopefully not get swept in the playoffs. Toronto Maple Leafs, they end up having an interesting offseason. They signed Jordan Spezza to replace Kadri, that they ended up trading last couple days ago in the Tyson Barrie trade. So Jordan Spezza slots in very, very minimum contract into that bottom line role, that fourth line role. They have players like Cody Ceci, Mitch Marner, who are the two guys that you really, really want to maintain. You want to keep these two guys, but Mitch Marner is going to request a contract of about $12 million, maybe upwards of 13, and it's going to be money, so you have to be a little bit careful about it. What it comes down to, they also got Alexander Kerfoot, another guy that they're going to have to re-sign, but he slots into that third line role. They obviously have Austin Matthews and John Tavares. Their centers are really lined up. They're very, very well set for a big run next year. It's just mainly, can they re-sign and maintain what they have so far? We'll see. Vancouver Canucks, they sign a few different guys. They sign Jordy Ben, defenseman, 2-year contract, $2 million annually. He's older. Hopefully he can show that he does really, really well. Vancouver also signs Myers to a 5-year contract, which is, it really solidifies that defense pairing. 5 years, $6 million. It's a big 5-year, $30 million contract. 29-year-old defenseman, 31 points in 80 regular season games. He's good two-way defenseman. The Vegas Golden Knights make a few different trades. They trade Colin Miller earlier in the offseason for a second-round and I believe fifth-round pick. So they lose out on a really, really big-time defenseman, and they don't really sign anybody back. So the Vegas Golden Knights, they had that miracle season in their first season and their inaugural season. We'll see in the future if they can get a guy later in free agency or if they're going to trade for somebody. But hopefully they can come back to their Stanley Cup form that they had in their first year. Now, the Washington Capitals sign a few long-term deals. They signed 2 4-year deals and 1 3-year deal. They sign 2 forwards to 4-year deals, Panic and Hathaway, and they sign goalie Vanacek for 3 years. So they sign good guys, the guys that are going to be starting for a while, and some good young young players on their team, which is what they need crucially. Alexander Ovechkin obviously being one of the best players in the league still. Winnipeg, they end up signing a few one-year contracts, nothing very, very good out there, but they have to re-sign players like Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor. They're going to have to pay them a lot of money, so don't expect them to make any huge moves. But with that, that is the last team on here. What do you think's the biggest impact trade signing out there? Do you think there were any players that were overpaid, or do you think there's going to be an NHL lockout in the next year or so? Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think. Tell me how I can improve my videos, because I really want to make these videos good for you guys. I make them for fun, but you guys are the ones watching them. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next couple of days. Otherwise, have a good 4th. Enjoy yourselves.